Welcome to the Mastering the Game of Allyship podcast. I'm Wendell. Today we have a dear friend of mine, a dear ally of mine, someone who has supported me for a very long time and is also in a very interesting, fun part, in my opinion. Fun means challenging, engaging, complex part of their allyship journey. And I wanted to share it with people because no matter what it is I say, and when how much I talk and I tell people allyship looks like this, it's very simple. Everyone needs it. Everyone does it. Everyone's already doing it. Our job is to just do it on purpose in public. People still have this idea everyone who's an effective ally is, and I haven't helped this out by having some of my guests be animators and engineers and all these people that we've conceived of as high status. But me and Becky have talked a lot about their career as a nurse practitioner, their journey of leaving that space, but also the allyship that they're preparing themselves to do to sort of help people not have to leave in the way that they did. And as I heard more and more about Becky's story, I was like, this is what's happening. This is the real alive allyship. The dramatic ones are cool. It's fun to be able to have these very marginal, sexy, changing the world style ideas, but most of the effective allyship that's happening is happening invisibly and with people who are considered to be normal. I want to return this to you, Becky, to talk about yourself, but I got to talk about the elephant in the room. You're a white lady named Becky from Minneapolis. If there was a target and I were to throw a dart right in the center of what, if we were playing Family Feud and I was to say all right, who needs to be more effective allies? Show us on the board. Basically white ladies, but that's also a made up concept. That's something I really want to unpack here, because while I could say that culturally, you're laughing because there is a truth to it. I've seen you do stuff that breaks that narrative and it needs breaking. So let's do it. What's up? Let's start with a simple softball question. What does allyship mean to you, Becky?
Oh, geez. Allyship is being in relationship with others in a way that is helpful to them, in the way that they want or need that help. That's a big question.
Well, tell me more about that. What's the when you experience that question as big, what's happening for you? What's going on inside?
Well, there's a lot of, there have been times in my life that I've been a forceful ally, hey, this is what you need. I'm going to do this. There have been times I tried to ally that, it's to get those warm fuzzies for yourself.
I do those warm fuzzies.
and sure, there's warm fuzzies involved, but eventually it has been able to evolve to hey, if nobody else ever knows about this, but I was able to do something helpful, and it's become less about those things, less about me. I've been able to decenter myself and not be the one saying, well, I see this, I think you need XYZ. But really listening and hearing what's needed and helping if I can.
This is fun. There's a few directions I want to go to dig deeper. First one, love the idea of allyship as a relationship. Was literally journaling on this morning. There is a lot of problems I see in allyship, and most of them come from the fact that we don't, as a society, create really good, healthy relationships. And for better or for worse, we don't necessarily track effectiveness in relationships. It feels weird. It'd be like, oh, am I a good son? Well, here are all my son points that I collected. And good job. Oh, am I a good daughter? Oh, here's my good daughter point. Oh, am I good? There are certain relationships, though, in which you do get to collect those accolades. School. I know that a lot of your allyship came up when you were in nursing school. That was something we talked about. Can I say it here? We're working on a book And he's working on a book. Maybe someday someone will see this and be like, oh, this is the beginning of that. But wasn't that a whole crazy thing? But also work. Work is the first time that people start giving you like metrics, and it's like, okay, cool, here's how good you were at your job, at your role. And usually inside of capitalism, when you have, money sort of connected to things, you can track your effectiveness in ways that culture supports it. But we haven't found a way to track how effective a relationship is. I get about as close as I can as a coach. I do try and close the loop of just like, hey, did you have a good time? Can I hold the eye contact? But I do find I have to give myself all of my like points, and that if I can feel into the nature of the relationship, I can kind of feel maybe I'm doing something that I personally doesn't feel good or doesn't give me warm and fuzzies. But when I take the perspective of the relationship as a whole, I can kind of feel into it. So there's something about feelings and I don't know, metrics that's in tension when you make allyship be a relationship. I think you still should do it, but it does invite what are the things that you track when you are deciding, okay, I'm going to be in an allyship relationship. Next thing you said is helpful. Love helpful. I think all allies are basically just effective allies are skilled helpers. Nurses in general are some of the most skilled helpers on the planet, but they don't get the accolades of that. And so like navigating like that world of being invisible, of having this very specific set of meta skills and not getting sort of societal kudos for it. Just saying it out loud feels like, oh, that kind of sucks. But I'm curious, like, what your experience has been in learning when you're being helpful and the sort of felt sense of ally relationships. Like, do you have any stories?
You know my stories. Anything you want me to?
I know your stories, but I want you to talk about your stories. I mean, okay, I'll throw one out. I'm gonna just embarrass you. Like I'm gonna give you the easy way out, and then I'll just say my stuff. Becky is a very phenomenal fundraiser. I started noticing it. Just like everyone, dogs that you find on the side of the road, homeless people that you befriend. And I started to take notice because, again, I've got a lot of friends. This is messed up, and I am putting all of you on blast. I won't speak to you by name, but like, I see a lot of people, you doing the awareness strategy. We talked about this in the dojo, just like, great, there's an awareness strategy. If you bring awareness to an issue, that's a form of allyship. On social media, everyone be telling me like, here's the thing that you're not supposed to say, here's the thing that you are supposed to say, here's all this stuff. And I'm like filtering through the noise. I have to still listen to it because it's my job. But Becky's one of the few people who I'm like, oh, a specific person in a specific time zone, that's time, space, towards this aim, and constantly bring people on board. What's funny and why I'm bullying you right now is that even when I talk to you about it, it's like I watch your eye like black out a little bit. You're like, no, I don't want to own that. And I'm like, but I've seen it a bunch of times. So what's that experience like? We kind of talked about it when we were working on the book, but like, what was the origin story of you being someone who like does community like this? Again, I have a lot of people that do mutual aid things. But and not to dunk on them, they always seem a little impersonal. Like I'll hear people being like, I'm doing mutual aid for this issue that I heard about. But everything that I've seen you do is always people that you're in relationship with. And I'm just curious, like, what's the origin of that? It's not a normal thing.
It started when I was a kid, actually, and I don't know why I started fundraising for the MS Society, but I know that's where it initially started. Like first it was a bookathon or something like that. And it got to where just every
like books though.
Huh?
And you do be liking books.
Yes, I do. And in college, I became interested in working with HIV/AIDS community and found out there was a camp for kids impacted by HIV/AIDS and started fundraising for them. It was just something that I could do. I was in school, I couldn't go work at the camp. I wasn't medical yet, I couldn't help medically, but it was something that I could do. The AIDS rides or another one. And I just built up this great community who are very like-minded. So we're kind of each, hey, here's my fundraiser, donating to everybody's fundraisers. But you just see a need and you want to help out. And that was one way I could do it. Second Mile Haiti is an organization really near and dear to me. A couple of friends that started this organization down there to help reduce orphanages, because a lot of these kids aren't actually orphaned. Their families just can't provide for them. And so they started an organization, a birthing center, nutrition center, help, stop malnutrition and educate and help people start businesses, and really amazing. And their board was heavily Christian. And when they came out as a couple, their board members, a lot of them dropped them. And they lost $7,500 in this. And back then that was a huge, huge deal. They're, big organization now, but really, really big deal. And so I looked at my sister, so Karen, Becky and a Karen helping, and said, hey, let's do a 50-mile walk and raise that money. And we did. And it's just, I guess I don't know why it started when I was younger, but it's just been something that it's fun when you see the money come in, even though it's not coming to me. It's like super fun to see that. It's fun to feel supported in these things that I'm doing, and to see them thrive and grow. And
so I want to twist the knife here a little bit, because again, I know I've seen it myself and I've seen other people. There's a lot of folk who are just as aware as you are, that know about all the causes and don't show up. Now, you've done a lot of like my teaching, so I'm gonna try and not get an official answer. I want to pretend like you never met me and just it came up someday. Maybe you got volunteer of the year and a journalist is asking you this. Why do you show up when other people don't?
something's tugging at my heart. Something is impacting me in a way that gets me motivated. And I don't know that I can put it into words, but see somebody hurt and I want to help. I mean, nurse practitioner.
Yeah, but I mean, there's even nurse practitioners though, who, and again, I'm bullying you into acknowledging that you're a good person. It's fantastic. My favorite thing in the world to do. There are nurse practitioners I know that do their job and go home and don't help a goddamn person afterwards, because their job is allyship. And I will say this to all the skilled helpers out there. Any therapist, any teacher, any nurse, any social worker, anyone who's in the helping professions, I will sign your doctor's note and say you're an effective ally, you can just stop. Like, your literal livelihood comes from doing effective allyship. You're done. You don't have to do more. So it gets really interesting. And we're going to triangulate this because it's very fascinating to me. The people who do more in a world, again, I started this gig because everyone was saying they wanted to do more and not. And then there's this set of people who I run into. And again, sorry, you're on the train, who do more. And yes, it's maybe difficult for you to see, but I'm not going to let you weasel out of the fact that just like, this is something unique, but in a sort of humanistic way. If one person can do it, everybody can do it. So here's a little tricky game. What would you do if you knew that, like, okay, Becky, we're gonna leave this timeline. You have done so well, everything's dope. We're just gonna move you into a new timeline where you have everything that you want. You don't gotta help nobody ever again, but you gotta train your replacement. What experiences would you give the Becky who you'll be leaving behind, the new person, their blank slate, so that they have whatever the sauce is inside of Becky that lets them see something and do something?
Oof, good question. I mean, in my head, I'm thinking of the things that impacted me from shows, movies, people that I've met. places I've been, I would want to have them experience those things as well.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Specifically, I want to go to the shows and movies first. We kind of were jamming about movies before we hopped on the call.
Yeah.
That's an underrated big source of inspiration. I think I'm tired of hearing about everyone's goddamn fifth grade teacher that inspired. It's great, but everyone had the damn fifth grade teacher. I haven't heard anyone say like, well, movies and stuff inspired me. And you know, anyone who's been following me for a while, I used to have a pop culture podcast. So the idea that like someone else might be like, what did you watch that made you want to be a good person? That's fantastic.
Well, when I was in college, there was a show called Life Goes On, and one of the characters, Chad Lowe, Rob Lowe's brother, was diagnosed with HIV, and so it kind of walked through his course of that, and it really impacted me. And I think it might have been my first time really that it emotionally hit me. It was early 90s. So, I mean, it had been a thing for a decade, but I was in my early 20s, and a bunch of us in my dorm unit wanted to help, wanted to do something. And where I was living at the time, small town Minnesota, there weren't really the opportunities to do it until I moved down to the cities. And I worked at an AIDS hospice, volunteered first, and then worked there, and then could do the AIDS rides, and it kind of spread from there. But that show was really the catalyst for, I want to do something.
Fantastic. So I hear three things that happen. First, you see a show, and this is beginning to be the part that I'm seeing as sort of the special Becky sauce. You see the show, but you're also open enough to get impacted by it. Like there's probably people who watched the show and was like, that was kind of nice. And they saw it and they remember might have been seeing it, but it didn't hit whatever the things do that hit us, that move us in different trajectories. Next, I'm going to dunk on some people I don't know because I love doing that. Sounds like everyone in the dorm was down, but like, were they all down? Like, who were the ringleaders?
I don't know that anybody else pursued it. I did end up volunteering at the local hospital up there. I called an agency to see if there was an AIDS hospice up there, and there wasn't. And then just volunteered at the hospital because I thought, well, that's next best thing.
Yeah.
But I don't.
This is a classic. I'm dunking on you because again, we just know each other very well. It's very fun. Every time you see Becky do a little shrug, she's shrugging over something amazing about herself. Wild. Because again, you're telling me pretty straight up, a bunch of people had the same impact from the movie, and then you did something. Now, it's a quick moment. It does seem like those decisions. There's an anime called My Hero Academia, and the main character, Izuku Midoriya, kind of always comes back to this place of they looked like they needed help and their body moved before their brain did. And I do hear this a lot. There is something about the nature of heroism where it's like something about like your heart, your body is more responsive than the mind. I think there's a lot of people who can rationalize their way into helping, but often the rational helpers aren't particularly good helpers because helping is actually a pretty irrational thing to do. So that's the first thing. The second is there's something about a Becky that after a certain level of impact, things change, things happen. The question then becomes how, and again, I'm bringing something into awareness that sounds like you don't know about. I definitely don't know about. I'm seeing it for the first time. But since we're talking about this alternate universe Becky, how would you get that person to hit the appropriate amount of impact? Like, how would you know what's the thing that moves them to action?
If I knew that, I'd be super effective in getting a whole bunch of people to.
Yeah. So I guess maybe a better question is, how would you like to fail at finding out what impacts people?
Throw a bunch of stuff at them and see what sticks.
Yeah, what kind of stuff? Like, you're gonna throw random stuff, but there's nothing at random. Eventually, you're gonna start seeing a pattern. Actually, we play a game. Give me 5 things you would throw at someone to see if you're just like gonna impact them.
I would definitely trying to think of like which specific movies, and it would depend on what avenue I want them to go down.
I just told you the brain isn't useful here. These are actually very reasonable questions, because this is taking responsibility kind of over someone's path, but taking it in a sort of, it's that tension between like the gardener and the mechanic. It's like, you're not making the seeds grow, but you do got to like create the conditions, you know?
Well, and I have been able to at certain points and certain events that I've done or made up, that I've been able to bring people along. I tend to get a little persistent, and people will ultimately kind of drop off of it because it's my thing, not, not their thing, is what I hear. Sort of, it'd be more about finding what are they most passionate about, what is something that tugs at their heart that they want to go follow and work on.
This is a huge thing. You cracked a bunch of stuff wide open, because there is a paradox. When people don't feel like it's their thing, they don't show up. And yet we also are telling everyone, don't center yourself in the thing. And it's like, that's crazy, right? Like, if they need to feel in the center of it to do the thing, we're saying people don't be in the center of it. Who's bridging the gap? And ultimately, it sounds like the gap is being bridged and taken care of by just the fact that like people find their thing and they do it, the thing that makes them move, again, that motivates them. And so then finding people's motivation, I do think is really solid. And it does sound like if you're gonna find a random person's motivation, align with that, send them on their way. But if you want to be the most helpful, you'd have to find people who are gonna have the same motivations as you. This is another thing that people don't like. I'm gonna bring basic white lady stuff back into this. In my travels through this world, and having met a lot of people who might self-identify as basic white ladies, the one thing that they like the least is each other. It's gonna be a problem if they share the same types of things that impact each other.
I don't know that. So you're seeing if our heartstrings were tugged by the same thing, that's not going to work out? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, if your heartstrings are tugged by the same thing, it absolutely will work out.
Yeah.
Instead of people, this is something that I've sort of dealt with in kind of, we'll call it self-love as a way to be a better ally. I love my capacity to help people that are different from me. Like, I'm one of the few people on the planet that gets to look at like white folk as exotic and be like, what's going on with them? This is fascinating. What's happening with you guys? Like, the view that I take isn't, oh, this is how it be. I want it to be anthropological. Let's take this seriously. If these are the folk who we want to hold responsible for making the world a better place, we gotta really figure out what makes them tick and do the thing. Most people stop at the first thing they don't like and go, and this is why they're bad, and now we know how to play the game. I'm like, that's ridiculous. They're still the people who we want to have help. How do we create that out? What I've noticed in myself is the people who are the most like me also are the most threatening to me.
Mm.
There might be some other Black folk out here trying to bring play and shadow work into allyship. I haven't met them yet, and so there is a way in which I get to be like, yay me, I'm special. And there is a deep wounding inside of, again, what I've sort of seen as, I'm using air quotes, it's not this, don't let this title stick. I think it's actually a very rude thing that people do to people, but y'all know what I'm talking about when I say basic white lady. That desire to be special, knowing that there is a sort of homogeneity in that group, means that it's very difficult to connect, to say, oh, you're like me, and so now we can sort of conspire literally to breathe together. But what I also hear in your story is that hasn't mattered that much. Like, you do still seem like you have the ability to bring people along with you to a point, and it does feel like, and we've talked about this in your own allyship practice, like that point is your edge. You'd like to be able to bring them more past whatever that point is. But even with that sort of, oh, I don't know if I want to like be sympathetic to folk like me to be in better helping, you still helped people get past that. And one of the things I did here was this persistence thing. Tell me more about that. Like, how does one get that persistence?
I think I was born with that. I'm just kind of a pain in the ass. Uh, my mom blames a lot of it on going back to work when my sister Karen and I were younger. The other two, so Karen and I are very, very independent and very persistent. I think
advocating for your own needs.
Yeah. And Mom, I don't blame you. That was good.
I'm sorry. Again, this is rough. This is an Oprah episode that, again, no one's going to see for probably a couple of years. And also only our parents are going to see and be like, why did you talk about me like that? I'm like, shut up. We're trying to help people. God damn it.
It was a good thing, Mom. It was good. No, but it's, I had pockets that I was comfortable helping. It wasn't like I was comfortable helping anybody. So in college, LGBTQ community, like that was my community. I'm straight, cis, basic white lady. But for some reason, that was the community I found it. That was the community that I really felt comfortable with and comfortable helping. And so for a very long time, that was really the group that I helped most. And to become an ally for the Black community was super intimidating to me. I didn't want to screw up. I didn't want to say the wrong things, do the wrong things, cause more harm. So I just read and read and read and read, which isn't doing anything but educating myself.
Yeah. It's not quite nothing, but it's not quite as much as people might think it is for having spent so many hours doing it.
Yeah, and it took
brushing your teeth. It's like more to dental health than brushing your teeth, but you should probably also be doing that.
Well, and you read it and it's like, okay, but then how do I use it? And the dojos, when I took that initial 12-week course with you, it was a safe place to fuck up. And I needed that where I could be called out, but it was safe and I could learn and realize I'm not going to die. And somewhere that it took a long time to get comfortable. So I don't know, that really goes back to the finding what triggers somebody to want to help. My persistence is my personality.
Okay. So this is beautiful because superpowers kind of have they're a double-edged sword. Your persistence is also going to be your weakness. When your persistence overused probably shows up. I also have persistence and stubbornness.
Yes.
And so people for whom are allergic to persistence are going to leave when it reaches whatever critical mass that they're not really excited about. And then the question is comfortability. There is this interesting tension where it's like there is a domain of expertise. I love pop culture. If that were a state, I would be the governor of it. I'd go, great. Everywhere the light, Simba, everywhere the light touches is your kingdom. And there is a draw for sovereignty. I mean, that is kind of why I made the mastering the game of allyship, is the mastery part is one of the biggest shadowy elements. It's like you're not going to do a good job if you don't have the capacity to hold the idea that you can do a good job. Like there is this like deep tension, and comfortability is one of the outputs of mastery. The reason I can just jump on this call, most people are like, when I invite them on the show, they're like, what are we gonna do? What's gonna happen? I'm like, I'm gonna book you for 90 minutes. We're gonna spend up to 30 minutes getting you to be not worried. And then we're just gonna like see what happens. Because I feel very comfortable being like, this has gone off the rails. Let's start over. I know I can do that, so I can say whatever the heck I want. I feel very comfortable in the podcasting like mode. And so I'm using it and really trying to center it as a strategy for showing people like what my work is and what's sort of happening. It's great. But it's this comfortability, but also this edge. How do you take your comfortable place, which is usually at your center, and move your center to an edge? That's really, from a consciousness standpoint, this paradox. All right, you got your center inside of LGBT communities in Minneapolis, a non-trivial of which probably are also Black. But then when you move to whatever this place called Black folk in Minneapolis, whatever that vehicle is, at least at first glance, it wasn't a comfortable road. The act of even moving through different spaces challenged that feeling of comfortability. Like we play a game every time I do a coaching session, but also I've been doing it with my friends of late. It's just good where I ask easy, medium, hard mode. Like, like, I do think that aspiring allies aren't as fastidious about the fact that they can choose how hard it would be. Like, it's like, great, if I want to move towards this thing called helping like Black folk in Minneapolis, easy, medium, hard mode. And then I have to have the 3 strategies. I feel like people will collapse onto like the first strategy that they feel they should be able to do. And then when they don't do it, they go, okay, I guess I'm terrible. It's like, no, make 3. What strategy was that? The first one that gets to you might be hard mode. Today you chose hard mode. Like, that was the fastest one. I'm like, I'm choosing easy mode. The relational space that we've created here is the dance of Becky's discomfort in hard mode and my ease, and something new happens in that space. So there's some P's that are emerging. I want to just throw these back at you. Persistence and personal. Haven't seen you do, I mean, I've seen you sort of support Allies for Black Americans. I've seen you support me, but I don't see you championing, at least in the time that I've seen you, big institutions. Like, when I see you at your like highest level of power, it's always personal and persistent. You show up, and it's always for someone who you're in relationship with. If I could distill Allyship down to that, I'd be like, yeah, do that. Do it personal, because personal also includes the comfort part. We're all really good at gunning for the people that we care about. I think the shadow that we're not really looking at is that sometimes there are people who we care about deeply who are really close to us who we are garbage allies to. And so then we try and go farther away from that to offset that, but it never closes that loop. And now you've probably been whacked to those people that are too far away from you. There is a lot of like concentric circles around like, okay, how do you be an ally to yourself first? Great, now how do you ally with the people that are going to help you ally to yourself? Then how are you going to ally to maybe someone outside of yourself? And then how will you bring those people who have already proven that they want to be allies to you out there? When I started this journey, it did not start there. I really did want to help people be like, whoever the hell you choose, I don't care. Let's just get rid of the ineffectiveness. But, and this is, I think, a good time to pivot, a lot of the people overwhelmingly that really show up in persistence and in personal ways to allyship are people who are in the middle of their own struggle, who have their own issue. And there's a double-edged sword to that. It's beautiful because there is this sort of empathy and compassion that they get, but also some of these people aren't resourced enough to be as effective. So it's January 2023. I regret nothing, but I do take a little bit of responsibility for your decision to leave the nursing profession. And I definitely take 100% responsibility for the state of my weird little allyship business. We are 2 people. I'm going to say, I'm going to close this gap for homies, but I'm going to say in our allyship practices, we are 2 people who are still committed to being effective allies while still figuring out how to pay the rent. And I think that's a cool thing. I think people need to like deal with that, because I think there is this sort of narrative of when I get X, then I can do Y. But X keeps getting pushed more and more and more down the line. So I get really interested in people who still show up for others even when their stuff isn't done. Of course, I'm talking to you, I'm just like, hey, one of the best ways in which you can be an effective ally is to find a way to like solve that problem. I just got back from a shift at the juice store. Why I work at a juice store? Money can be used to buy goods and services. I need to work in the juice store so I can go help people. I put off as long as I could, and then I was like, all right, we're due. But it's got to not feel like a failure. I think I put it off when it was like, I'm giving up. It's like, no, I'm not giving up. I'm moving towards where I want to go and expanding my zone of comfortability. And so I'm curious, what keeps you helping others even as you're working on helping yourself? Like, just in a very material way. Many people I've seen use that as an excuse to leave the fight, but I haven't seen it in you. What's up? Why?
Yeah, it was a lot easier when I was making good money and I had many monthly donations that I gave to multiple organizations that I had to cancel almost all of them before I quit my job. Should cancel all, but it hurts. So I can't, to me, that was an easy allyship. I can give money. I'm not giving my time as much, but I can give money. I'm fortunate that I have such an amazing network of compassionate, generous people that say when I helped that man get an apartment and we were to furnish the apartment. None of that came from me except asking my people, hey, I know this amazing person who could use a hand up, who's willing to help out. And I didn't have to use my own resources other than my people.
Mm.
And
Or let's call that your resource.
well, that an amazing resource.
It's tricky.
And same with that dog I found in the park. It was, I put out an ask and people came through and it was just amazing. So I could still help without it being my money that I no longer have, the ability to shell out like I was. So it is a pivot, it's a change that you have to work at a little more, but.
What's that change like for you? I will say, as someone who has always been more of a, when I have money and someone makes a direct ask, I can give it. It's easy. If someone is in front of my face asking for something, if I'm not giving that thing, I'm always moving into negotiation mode. Something about allies don't like negotiation. It's weird. It's one of my favorite things on the goddamn planet. And I spent time in China where they've taken negotiation to an art. I've yelled, I've cursed out old Chinese ladies, and then had them like give me a hug after we found like that space where we could jam. That pivot, yeah, it required a negotiation, I think, with yourself, because if there was like an easier strategy, you were willing to move into not just a harder strategy, but a more personal strategy, a more vulnerable strategy of just like, hey, here's this thing I care about. I don't know the specifics of your deal, but like I have spent the last year, with a hand out saying like, hey, how can you sort of support me? And have more or less exhausted the billboard approach that is social media. When people ask me these days, like, hey, how do I be an effective ally? I'm like, Girl Scout cookies, baby. You got to go door to door. And even if it's conceptually door to door, it's got to be personal. All your asks have to be personal. You seem like you just picked this up. I never taught this. This is something I've learned in the last like weeks, months. So even when you were in the dojo and I was teaching this, like I never said this stuff, but you already had that. I'm curious, do you have any insights on, again, where that comes from? Or how to cultivate it if, say, you have someone who is incredibly impersonal, someone who's like, actually, I don't want to interact with people. I would love my allyship to be as distant as possible, knowing that the effective allyship happens at not distance. Like, what advice would you give for someone that you see trying to show up that way?
Where they don't want it to be personal. If they have the financial means, if that's all you can do, organizations need money. So give the money to places you want to support. Find someone who does want to do the boots on the ground stuff and fund them. I mean, that is another way to do it. And that's how I originally did it so after George Floyd, and I donated to lots of organizations. I donated goods, I donated money, but I didn't donate time, that personal one-on-one kind of initially. That took a while.
Well, what changed? Because again, in this particular example, the person is lamenting that they are not an effective ally, but they're doing everything that you said. You're like, you're doing it. Again, I see this time and time again. Half the time that someone thinks they're a bad ally, it's their own weird feelings about it. I look at their stuff, I do a little scan, I say, hey, let's have the uncomfortable conversation. Let's talk about your financials. Money is going somewhere and you're doing it. Why don't you feel good about that? And the answer typically comes to they don't feel the impact. It's a lot of going out, but again, it never comes back to them. The beautiful thing about the personal is that the loops are closed. They're very closed loops. You see the man in the apartment, you see the eyes lighting up, you're like, this is good. I'm enjoying this. This person's enjoying this. If an opportunity came up, not only would you be better at doing it having done it once, you can chase those feelings, those memories of those feelings in the past going forward. So this person is about to go through the journey that you've gone through of just like, I feel bad about being an ally, but I'm doing the thing. Like if they're doing nothing, I think that advice is really solid. Like, oh, you're doing nothing? Do what you can from where you are. But if you're not satisfied with the allyship at this place, this is really, I guess, a question about like, what are the next steps? And what were your next steps? Again, I'm charting this story and There's a reason why I'm helping Becky read this book. Like as a storyteller where she's the main character, it's just, I love you to death, you're not good at it. But I can still see the story structure though. You were helping before you had the money. And then there was an era where you had the money, and now you're back to the era where you don't have the money, and you're coming back to like your roots of, well, I'm still helping like I was when I was 20 something. That's cool. That's a narrative arc. There are many people who never had your backstory that are just starting, say, with the money and the resources. And it seems, and this is where I'm going to be more vague about it, like that some part of them wants what you had here. And I guess that's the thing that I'm most curious about is how do we get people who are showing up well, we'll just say consistently. The persistence is there. They're giving every month, they're doing the thing, they're doing the easy thing, but they're feeling disconnected from it. How do you get them to be connected to it? How do you invite them into deeper connection just from an interpersonal level, especially if they're already doing the work? That's the big thing that I see. Like I see sort of white people. There's some that aren't doing anything. I'm like, you guys can miss me with that. The ones that tug my heartstrings is when I'm just like, geez, Michael, you're like actually doing a whole lot of stuff and still beating the shit about yourself. Like, let's not actually focus on you doing more things. Let's do it. Why you inherently don't like yourself and how it's getting in the way of you showing up.
I I do definitely, when I'm doing fundraisers, I try to show the impact so that the people that are doing it from a money perspective instead of a hands-on perspective see what they were able to do. So I'm hoping that they do get the warm fuzzies that will help prompt them to do more. So the next time maybe they see a need, they would jump on it because they were able to feel that and see the impact that their money made. Man, I wish I knew how to get more people to do it, because I mean, that's your whole thing. It's getting people to be allies. You'd be out of a job if we were all super good at it.
I mean, I would love to be out of this guy's job. I woke up tomorrow. This is Ben Affleck and Good Will Hunting. Happiest part of my day is when I come to your door. In 15 seconds, I think you might not be there. I'd love to come to my own door and think I'm not gonna have to put my clown makeup on and go teach people. I mean, I love that. But I can see this moment and I feel like people have barriers to receiving that impact. That makes sense. If they're pushing stuff out and they say call it a boundary, and only things go out but things don't come in, I'm curious if you have any intuition for what are the blockers that stop people from feeling the feelings that they would be totally, in theory, allowed to feel for the work that they've literally done. Now, this is a hard question to ask. I've been dunking on you regularly since I've known you, and even in this particular conversation as someone who struggles with that. But I've also seen how you've grown in that regard. So I'm curious, like, could you tell someone who is stepping on this path, like, what are the blockages inside of themselves they're going to have to let go of, and what does that look like?
Do you think it has anything to do with Midwesterners were notorious for, even if I need help and someone offers it, I'll be like, no, I'm good. I'm good. So there's definitely a block of, I mean, my sister shattered her tibia. She doesn't want any help. Like, she's going to do everything herself. I went to help her out yesterday and she scoots on her office chair to get her own water. Like, we're not good at accepting it. I don't know if there's something with that, if there's a barrier.
I think there's something with that. And I don't even want to go further with it, because that Midwestern thing, and I'm coming after you Midwesterners, I am one, but I didn't start as a Midwesterner. I was talking with Sonia yesterday. I was like, there's something really beautiful about the way that the East Coast helps. It's very much like, fuck you, okay, now, like, go over here. You got to make the left of the thing and then da-da-da-da-da. And it's very aggressive. It does feel like, and I've been going up on this with my own sort of coaching thing, is that to receive help is to be weak and to give help is to be strong. And so no one wants to be in the receptive mode, except you can't be, there's like an almost masculine feminine polarity thing here. This is something I jammed about with, actually, this is in the book, so no one's seen this. I do partner dance. And when you're dancing as a leader, you kind of decide what the dance looks like. And for the longest time, I was like, okay, it's my job to lead, and it's the follow's job to follow, and they just got to get with the program. And I'd have some pretty good dances, but my measure of was my dance good was I'd put a little eye outside of my head. And a lot of the places we danced, I'd literally, there'd be mirrors in the room. So I'd be like, okay, great. I'm looking good. We're looking hot. Everything's going great. I'm doing a good job leading. A lot of times I'd be very exhausted by the end of the night. I'm spending a lot of energy to make shit look how it was supposed to look. And then, I did enough classes that circumstance happened that they needed people to follow. And I'm like, okay, I'll follow. This is probably a useful thing to learn. Circumstances happen such that it'll be too awkward for me to be like, no, I'm utterly committed to leading. Forget all y'all. We'll mix this whole class up as I hold on to this very specific point of view. Immediately when I learned that following is just like, following is really hard. The type of listening you have to do with your body into the music to like be sensitive to the changes, but you can't change too fast. If you change too fast, it's not a good feedback loop. And what I also realized is like, there's a lot of moves that I was making that feel awful, that I didn't know what it felt like. I was too much in the doing mode. So I didn't know what it felt like to receive what I was giving you. Thankfully, we all looked good enough. And if I was aligned with people who wanted to look good, people would still dance with me. I mean, I was identified as a good dancer for a very long time, doing some coercive nonsense. And there's something in this Midwestern type of help where it's like, oh, I win if there's more on the giving side than on the receiving side. I'm like, that's insane. If the universe did that, it would tear itself in half. It has to be equal giving and receiving. And so there is something about people who overgive that their blocker to effective allyship is going to be knowing, like, what does it feel like to be supported, to be listened to do all this stuff. I'm like, of course you guys aren't going to be able to do it. Who do you do it with? People are running around being like, I got to make sure that I'm not centering myself and da 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 da. And I'm like, go do that with your friend next door. And then you'll know, find the safe practice partner to do the thing with. And that is, I totally forgot that the Allyship 101 that we did, the whole thing was, I was like, nah, y'all, this whole week is just going to be about trust and rapport and storytelling. Your job, because we were doing it to like train moderators for this Facebook group where I was like, you don't need to do the Allyship stuff. You can send them all to me. But even the triage of finding out what someone needs involves so much trust doing and creating these positive feedback loops so that people know, have a felt sense that they're doing the right thing, that they're in alignment. You've seen me make these weird faces where I'll be like, I know this thing that I need to do is this way. And I also know that you're going to like throw up when I do it. And I'll be like, Becky, I got to do this thing. It's going to be crazy. Do you consent? You're always like, okay. And then we do it. And more times than not, it ends up being like really good. And I get that stronger feedback loop of trust when I do that. But it's feeling that reach. What it feels like is that people are reaching too far. Like they'll go like hard in the paint, well past that safe, comfortable zone. Instead of reaching from the place of strength, now they're overextended. And it does feel like there's cultural baggage. Here's the terrifying thing though, again, we sort of talked about it earlier. To undo that cultural baggage is to undo the self. And maybe you did say that maybe we would do some big mind stuff. And I'm like, maybe we do big mind a little bit. I'm not going to get into exactly what big mind is, but really like what part of people are subjects to their cultural programming. If there is this Midwestern thing called give good, receive bad, how does that part live in people's ecosystem? And how as an effective ally do you bring gentle awareness to that part and invite it to do something else? Not to unmake itself. I'm not going to go next door to anybody and be like, kill yourself. You're not useful, please die. But I've seen it so many times and it does feel like it transcends the Midwest, but it's also still very much like a Midwestern thing. Like that concept of charity itself is kind of part of the problem. Like the idea of like mutuality, it's like if giving can only be something that gives you status. I was jamming on this the other day where I was like, if you're giving to like be more powerful, you're never going to give to the degree that someone becomes more powerful than you. And in those positive feedback loops, it's like, okay, I'm giving to this place to get this person to a stable spot to then maybe learn from them, maybe to then receive stuff from them. There's an exercise that I'm working on in the book of just like, how do you go to someone for whom you've targeted as helpless and receive from them first. People go, that's crazy. I'm like, yeah, if you can't receive from them, why the hell would they want to receive from you?
Mhm.
And people can't, they struggle to imagine the idea that like anyone offering help wouldn't be received. And this is a Midwesternism, if ever there was one. Beggars can't be choosers. The hell yeah, they can. That's where all the ineffective allyship is coming from, is that people are thinking like, you can't choose. It's like, that's not, allyship should be empowerment. And if it's empowerment, one of my definitions of having more power is having more choice. And so this beggars can't be choosers versus giving people more choices. That's where the rubber meets the road.
You want me to answer something in there?
I was just riffing. Does that bring anything up for you? Is there
Well,
anything you'd like to
yeah, and I
respond
think
to that?
instead of being worried about feeling weak, it's more worry about being a burden to someone else. For me,
Ooh, let's sit there for a second. It's not feeling weak, but it's feeling like being a burden. I'm gonna hold those and say, let's say those are the same thing for right now.
okay.
So keep telling me about the burden thing, but it just felt too quick where it's like, oh no, it's not the weak thing, it's the burden thing. I was like, well, if someone's strong and then someone's a burden, what's the difference? I mean, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings where he's like, I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you. Frodo's a burden at that point, and Frodo's a burden because he's weak. How do we, in hiding that fear of weakness into something that seems nice, how is that perpetuating the loop? I don't know. I'm just talking about it in real life. But tell me more about this burden thing. It's very fascinating.
Well, taking someone away from their own time, their own resources, their own family, they have something better to do than come over here and help me, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I'm gonna completely like dunk on it.
I mean,
But that is it, because there's an insane thought inside of there. It's the insane thought that truly, and I don't mean to be terrible, we were talking about this earlier, that only children can think and make sense of. And I've done this to you, Summer. I'll be like, get your grubby mitts off my thoughts and my feelings. But the audacity that someone could take away someone's time against their will is the insane thought. When I say people don't negotiate, people don't make their ask, it's because seemingly, like, once they've made the ask, because they're not making asks early and often, they're already in emergency mode. They can't not have the thing, and they don't want to encounter themselves in emergency mode not having the thing. And so they'd rather seemingly, I guess, waste away in silence to not be a burden. But really, what they don't want to own is the power of being a burden. If you're a burden, you become someone's dependent, you become someone's child. And it still seemingly comes back to that like strong, weak thing, except children are very powerful. It's the same narrative that we have about victimhood. It's not that it's bad. It's very powerful to be like, I am helpless. Now you help me. And then when you're helpless tomorrow, I'll help you. But I'm not going to help you from a helpless place. And you're not going to help me from a helpless place. And half the time, the allyship game that's so boring is everyone trying to like, are you helpless? No, well, this person's more helpless. And they're doing this weird accounting, whereas like all skillful help comes from comfortable mastery, ownership of your skill and what you have to offer. At the same time as you might be awareness of your weakness, of the ways in which you're a burden and all this stuff. Being able to hold both allows you to have the inhale, exhale flow of effective allyship. Great. I know what effective allyship feels like because I receive it regularly, because I'm allowed to be this vulnerable person while also not having to give up all of my power just because on Tuesday I'm vulnerable, but on Wednesday I'm strong. The narratives that we built for people, or that people built for themselves, are too small. I guess it seems like I can only be completely strong, or I can only be completely weak. And as we've done with like parts work, especially in allyship, it's like, nah, man, that changes moment to moment, second to second. And so that's why I like doing the inner work for allyship, is to let people know it's just like, even as you're growing and struggling, like you can't leave the fight. Like even as you're like saying, I got to learn some stuff, I'm like, great, go practice some stuff while you're learning some stuff. In fact, you might even have more grace afforded you if you're trying to do stuff while also learning than if you've done all this learning and then try and do something. And everyone's like, well, this learning clearly didn't do anything for you. But I'm still very curious about this like burden piece, because the other side of effective allyship is that anyone who is an effective ally will jump to the opportunity to be of service and do it in a way that is very empowering. So the fear of being a burden is actually the fear of all the ineffective allies in the world, which makes total sense. And I'm dealing with this myself right now, where it's like, how do I, in the receptive, the yin, the follow mode, teach the leaders to lead better? Because I can teach leads. I can teach every single lead how to move their body in the right way. I used to do dance teaching. Teaching following, I don't know how to do it, but I do know that like when I have a lead that I was like, I'm not feeling this, I knew exactly how to dance to stop and counteract every single one of their nonsense moves they try to do on me. And that's when I realized, oh, that's the power of the follow. There is a way in which when Midwesterners, we'll say white Midwesterners, or just anyone who is so afraid of doing harm, puts themselves unskillfully in the follow mode, they become Gumby, they become Jello people. And of course, they're like, I feel jello-y and Gumby and insubstantial when I show up as an ally this way. I'm like, yeah, because you chose noodle arms. What does it look like when you choose not noodle arms? And that's when tension shows up. It's when discomfort happens. Frame is the act of recognizing like where your momentum is. And again, persistence and personal closes the distance enough that you always know your frame. You never know when you're out of frame. There's ways in which you want to be an ally. I think, actually, I don't know. We worked closely together doing the game of life. So maybe this is an opportunity for me to ask, what is your goal? What does it look like when you're going to reach level 20 ally? Level 20 for you people who don't play D&D is the highest level cap.
Okay, thank you.
There's no level 21. When you reach level 20, you've ascended to like godhood. Like it's the highest tier that a player can. You get to level 20, you immediately make a new character and you get them to level 20.
I guess I've never thought of it that way of like winning it. It's just a matter of doing it and whatever pops up at that time to go do. I guess not being afraid to jump into something that I haven't already studied or know or have met people or have friends in a certain group that I feel super comfortable with. It'd be nice to be able to jump into any allyship with anybody that needs it without having that knowledge first. Just feel comfortable in I can show up and I can help because I know I need to listen. I need to, ask and not tell and not come with my own agenda. So if I could be really comfortable with that and feel safe, feel effective in any space, that would be my win.
And how many hours of fucking up do you think it will take to get to level 20?
Oh my God, so many. My whole life.
Well, not necessarily. This is the key. It's not necessarily your whole life. Level 20 can happen much faster than you can think. The reason why people make new characters is once you get to level 20, it gets a little boring. You just roll up into town and you're just like, the town is different now. I firebolt this guy's gone. You make the new character because there is a joy of going through the levels. What I am trying to do with effective allyship is to make the going through the levels a fun experience. I do think people hit at that plateau of like, well, I'm just going to be here forever. I'm like, well, yeah, of course you're going to be here forever. The only thing you can imagine is yourself being here forever. Our impoverished imagination on what excellence and mastery looks like is weird. I feel like if I asked you level 20 nurse, it'd be easier than say level 20 ally, but they're the same. They're both skilled helpers, so they should have actually more overlap than not. But for some reason, and I have a few intuitions for what this reason might be, but there is some reason where people will split, though they won't collapse that awareness that like, oh, the highest version of my personal craft isn't the same highest version of my relational craft.
I think maybe I feel like I hit level 20 with certain allyship that I did in the past, and then I can transition to another group. Initially MS Society, and then I transitioned to LGBT, HIV, and I can feel a total comfort and jump in at any time. I wouldn't say it got boring, but did kind of move on to the next thing.
That feels good. That feels like a good place. Finding joy at one's edge feels like the lesson here. And I will give you this gift, my dearest Becky. Your heart is open enough that your edge is very obvious to you, and you've not become an agoraphobe. I think you would stop being an effective ally if you stayed in the house all day. Even through COVID and stuff, you were reaching to get touched to then respond. I think I'm going to tie this up in a bow. Yeah, you've got to find your own, be it positive or negative triggers, because both of you, those will move you into action. Like there's a certain degree in which I get scared, I get real effective. There's a certain day when I get really excited, but I also get really effective. My superpower exists in both of those modes. And so how much of my time do I want to spend being a little scared? How much time do I want to feel like swagging out? And you gotta do both. And so finding the fun fear place, that thrilling place, is itself the path to what's going on. To close the loop though, we were talking about the feeling of like being insane. To change yourself feels insane. The feeling of sanity is the feeling of being like, yes, I feel like Wendell today. Becky feels like Becky today. If you introduce any sort of change that makes you feel not like that, even if it's good, you're gonna feel crazy. So that's another piece that I guess I want to leave our listeners with today, is just like, how do you court insanity? How do you microdose insanity to get where you want to go? And I'll close the loop on this by saying creativity is itself microdosing insanity. I think it is this sort of getting outside of yourself and then coming back in and making that thing, and designing a game, designing a system that allows you to be yourself in a way where even when you're not feeling like yourself, you can still show up to it. That's what podcasting is for me, where I'm just like, I don't know what these conversations are going to be, but I know and I trust my ability to be like, ooh, there's a thing there. Let's blow that up. Or, oh, that's shenanigan. Like that Lego piecing of conversation is something that I feel really comfortable in. And knowing that the goal is to show people what can be done, what are the different opportunities, is exciting to me. So thank you, Becky. Is there anything you want to plug? Is there anything that you would be like, yes, as an ally, I could use allies supporting me in XYZ way? Here are things that you think are like cool or dope. Like this, that's the thing that I offer people on the podcast. It's just like, yeah, now you can talk to my people and make them do whatever you want them to do.
I should have thought about that, but I mean, all my people know I'll be posting my next thing, my next ask whenever it hits me. And I know they'll show up to that. And when our book gets out there, buy our book.
Yes. Get on Becky's podcast. If you know any nurses, or if you've had any experience in the nursing industry, it doesn't exist yet, but Peggy's going to make a podcast to talk about this and how to get to be a level 20 nurse. And by level 20 nurse, level 20, I think, sane nurse inside of well-being. You might be able to get to level 20 and not have that. I think what Becky wants for people is the level 20 where you're happy and don't get run out of a hospital because like things got too crazy.
Yep.
All right. That's all we got for today, folks. Spay and neuter your pets, in the words of Paul Parker, and we'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, stop it.